What's up, gamers? A few weeks ago, Blue Protocol Star Residence held its closed beta test, and I had the privilege of taking part. Overall, I had a really good time. There were a few things that I found concerning, but the good aspects outweighed the bad. I'm here to tell you about it and hopefully help you figure out if Star Residence is worth dumping some of your time into. Let me mention real quick that my time playing the closed beta test was cut short due to technical issues. I tried out some troubleshooting methods like uninstalling and reinstalling the game, then contacted customer support. After more troubleshooting and nothing working, support told me that they were doing an internal investigation. It was a closed beta test after all, so I guess stuff like this is bound to happen. Hope it helps smooth out the final release on October 9th. Let's start with the character creator. Now, I would say it's pretty solid. I don't think it's as good as other anime style games such as Phantasy Star Online 2 or Code Vein. However, I've also seen way worse than this. I generally like the game's cel-shaded graphics. Looks pretty nice. The art style is solid overall. One aspect of the character creator I thought was pretty cool was how you can mix and match front and back hairstyles. So like, for example, combining long hair with like different types of bangs. I personally haven't seen that in any other video game I've played. So for me at least, that's a cool new feature. And they also let you preview a bunch of different outfits, including like changing colors in the character creator, so that way you can get a better idea of like what you're trying to go for.
However, it's important to remember that this game does in fact have cosmetic gacha, so I don't think it's much of a stretch to think that a lot of these outfits you get to preview in the character creator are going to be locked behind FOMO banners that have a limited time for you to pull on them. Just something to keep in mind.
Since gacha was just mentioned, I might as well take a moment to talk about the monetization. So I didn't really get too much into this. From what I understand, the worst part of the monetization in Star Residence is the Battle Imagines. Battle Imagines are essentially these monsters or characters from the story that you can summon during battle who will show up and do one attack. And from what I understand, the most powerful Battle Imagines are locked behind the gacha, and your odds of getting them are very low. So in other words, you're going to have to hit the slots a lot if you want to get the best Battle Imagine. And on top of that, once you unlock them, you have to start grinding to make them actually usable. So, sounds like that might be a pain for like high level gameplay. However, if this is like other MMOs I've played, I'm sure you won't literally need them in order to beat like the most difficult content in the game. It's probably going to be preferred if you're like a super hardcore player and want to like run the same endgame dungeon like 50 times in one day. I'm not a hardcore player, so I'm not too concerned about that personally, but we'll see how that plays out once the actual game is released. I should also probably mention that this game's premium currency is called Rose Orbs. Now these come in two varieties. You've got the bound Rose Orbs and the unbound Rose Orbs. As far as I'm aware, the only difference is that I think the unbound Rose Orbs can only be obtained by spending real money, and there's certain things that you can only buy with that variety of Rose Orb. Whereas the bound ones you can find through treasure chests out in the game world, as well as obtain them through daily and weekly missions.
Now that we have the money talk out of the way, let's talk a bit about the plot. Mild spoilers ahead. After we finish making our character, we are shown a scene of our character floating through this mysterious purple astral void. Voice tells us that we're about to reach our target's core and that we can transcend the limits of civilization. Now, before we're allowed to make any sense of this obviously foreshadowing scene, our character wakes up in the guest room of the Astraleeds Tavern, the same place that the original Blue Protocol started. So apparently what we just saw was a dream. Or was it? At our bedside, we find the game's noob drip and a mysterious note. To someone deep in slumber, did you sleep well? I hope you're fully rested by the time your eyes reach this letter. I've left new clothes by the window. I took the liberty of discarding your old ones. What? Fuck you. I liked that outfit I made. When you're ready, come downstairs. Behold, the most radiant young girl in the crowd, her brilliance eclipsing the stars. You'll know it's me. Looking forward to seeing you. So after reading the letter, we make our way downstairs where we are introduced to Irona, Star Resonance's main waifu. She explains that because she saved us from being cooked and eaten alive by goblins, we now owe her compensation for saving our life. Even though we didn't ask for her help in the first place, but hey, whatever. You know, people gotta make their money somehow, right? Right? After some bickering, we get to name our character and find out that we have, you guessed it, amnesia. Wow. Haven't seen that a bajillion times in other RPGs and anime before. But hey, it's an MMO. I'm not expecting Shakespearean writing here or anything.
呼べばいいかしら。せっかくだからインパクトのある名前にしましょうか。例えば
Sexy Steamer King.
とかゴブ狩りのアン
Yeah, that brings up some really disturbing imagery in my mind.
We also find out that it's actually Irona who is in debt, and that her plan all along was to have us help her pay off said debt. From there, we set off on our quest to become debt-free, just like in real life.
You okay there, buddy? How do I press enter? Adventure. Oh, you can't talk until you're level 3? Okay, whatever. You know what, you can just, have a good time there. Yeah. I'm sure you're having fun.
Oh, quick note. In the original Blue Protocol, your character actually spoke with fully voiced dialogue in the cutscenes, which is not the case here in Star Resonance. Kinda disappointing, not gonna lie. So in order to make some fat stacks of Luno, which is this game's version of like gold coins or Gil from Final Fantasy, we go about questing as we get introduced to the game's various mechanics and areas outside of Astraleeds. Typical tutorial stuff. Eventually, we meet a spear-wielding warrior clad in a snowman suit, trotting around the, no doubt, sweltering Asteria Plains. Turns out the snowman warrior is actually another waifu named Tina. After some more story hijinks, we are brought into Tina's mindscape. At first I was a little iffy with this part since you're thrown into a walk and talk section. Not a big fan of that form of storytelling in games. Code Vein was another game I played that was also guilty of this lame-ass gameplay trope. If you don't know what a walk and talk it is, it's basically when you're playing a game and you have to like follow a character around as they spout exposition at you, and you have to like hold the control stick, or in this case the W key, down to just barely slowly walk right behind them. Really obnoxious in my opinion. Thankfully, this walk and talk doesn't last too long, and we are thrown into our first dungeon, which is still taking place within Tina's mindscape. Bit of an interesting choice for a first dungeon. Not usually what you'd expect from this sort of game, but hey, you know what? I'll take it. It's neat. Once we reach the end of the dungeon, we have our final showdown with Tina. Now, if you've played a lot of games, you'll know that oftentimes when you face humanoid enemies, they will be much larger than your character. I would imagine the reason that game developers do this is to make the boss easier to locate on the screen, as well as making them more intimidating.
So, I thought it was kind of hilarious how you see Tina and she's like normal sized, but then when you fight her, she's suddenly like 10 feet tall. But since you're in her like mind space dreamscape, her size actually fluctuates, and at one point there's like an attack she does where she turns into a literal giant, like she's on the side of the arena and sweeping her fucking lance across the whole arena that you have to dodge. So after we defeat Tina in her mindscape, a few days pass and our character wakes up from a coma once again in the Asterleeds Tavern, and the quest for Luno continues. Along the way, we have several encounters with this cult of masked men who appear to worship this disembodied witch, whose voice we hear several times, and at one point she even possesses our character and has us wandering through the streets of Asterleeds at night. I thought that scene was pretty cool. At another point, the cultists interrupt this festival that's happening in town, so we have to slap them around a bit. There was another part that I thought was pretty interesting where we go onto this cruise ship and there's this con artist guy who we have to catch, so our character winds up playing a card game with him that can't be won because he keeps cheating like the filthy scammer that he is. So we buy time distracting the con artist guy. Meanwhile, Irona investigates the ship to find more information, and during this part we actually get to control her directly, which I thought was pretty cool. You don't get to like do any battles with her or anything. It's just you walk around the ship and you have the ability to like talk to people and whatnot. It's a really short little segment, but I still thought it was pretty neat. And I appreciate the fact that they're adding little things like that into the game's plot, so that way it's not just go here, kill 5 of this enemy, collect 10 bippity boops, turn them into the quest NPC. It's just nice to have change-ups like that. While we're on the ship, we also get to meet a new member of the main cast. His name was Tartar Rod or Tartar Sauce, something like that. He's like this rich dude who wields twin axes from the original game, which so far have not been made playable in Star Resonance. Really hoping those come in a future update. Anyway, after meeting Tartar Sauce and the con artist getting outed, he pulls out a cake with smoke coming out of it, and it winds up exploding, blowing up the whole fucking cruise ship. Thankfully, our characters are able to narrowly escape the fiery jaws of death. There's also this deduction minigame you have to play a few times, where you're basically presented some information and you have to figure out what happened based on the information you're presented. But I thought this part was a little, shitty, to be perfectly honest with you, since there's a skip button, which in my opinion just trivializes the whole deduction minigame. But even if you don't skip it, like the way it works is we're shown like 3 paragraphs of information, and the game basically asks us to figure out like what happened based on that info. But all you have to do is click on the words and the important part gets highlighted. So even if you don't skip the minigame, it still does the thinking for you, which I thought was kind of just weird. Like I just mentioned, it just trivializes the whole minigame. It's like, why would you even design it like that? And the answer is probably because they didn't want to make it too hard because it would filter certain players.
There's also a stealth segment at one point, which is nothing crazy. You just have to avoid the line of sight of some enemies that are turning around. You know, it's no Metal Gear Solid or Dishonored or anything super in depth like that. But again, I still appreciate the fact that they're just trying to give us objectives other than go here, kill this guy, get X amount of things. Oh, another bit about the story I want to mention is the character Narulu, who's introduced early on. I guess he's sort of meant to be like your character's honorary little brother. Now, I kind of thought this kid was annoying, right? Now, what happens later is you go to this place called Misthoen. I think that's how it's pronounced, Misthoen, which is out in Asteria Plains, and it's like being invaded by these monsters. I think they're related to the cult. I honestly can't remember the details offhand, and I'm too lazy to go look back at the footage. Anyway, as you're infiltrating this town and trying to break through these barriers, Narulu shows up, and he's like, "Hey, you know, I can help too. I might be a little kid, but I can still prove my worth." And the moment he showed up, I'm like, this kid's gonna die. Then 10 minutes later, he fucking dies. And I just completely lost my shit. I really, oh my god, I wish I had the recording, but unfortunately I had my mic off at the time, but I just completely lost my shit, burst out into laughter, and I was all just like, yes, yes, fuck Narulu. That's what you get for trying to be a hero. Little shit, died like the bitch he is. And it's funny, because the game, like, tries to play this off like it's a serious scene, too. Like, you even see your character, like, burying him and putting up, like, a grave in, like, a very brief scene. It probably was not meant to be as hilarious as I found it, but, you know, I guess I'm a little bit of a sick fuck. So aside from all that, the only other things about the plot I really want to bring up for now is that there's this dude named Denville who is out to avenge his fallen comrades who died in this war that happened prior to the game beginning. And it would seem that he's being manipulated by Hruga, who is the witch that possessed our character earlier in the game and had us wandering the streets of Asterleeds. We also wind up going to this village where everyone's dressed up in tribal garb, where we meet their local princess, who gives us a disguise so we can infiltrate the village and take part in this little mini tournament arc, which by winning gives us the right to enter their Forbidden Zone. Once we enter the Forbidden Zone, we meet Undead Ted, who gives us some info about a battle that took place there in the past. And then eventually we make our way to the Dragonclaw Valley, which I thought was a pretty cool dungeon. I think it was my favorite of the 3 that I got to play during the beta test. The boss at the end is pretty cool. It's this wind dragon who you fight on this like floating rock in the middle of a storm. And as you get his health bar down, he winds up retreating to a higher altitude, and you have to like fly up after him to these 3 other floating rocks that are above the initial arena where he's resting. So you go up there to finish him off in time. Pretty cool fight overall. And that's about as far as I got into the story of the closed beta. As far as I'm aware, the full release is going to have the same amount of story content that the beta did. I believe I was near the end of chapter 5. I'm not exactly sure how many chapters there were in the beta. At least 6, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, overall, I thought the story was fine. I definitely got the feel that it was meant to be more of a side plot to supplement the main story of the original Blue Protocol, because you gotta remember that JP Blue Protocol and Star Resonance were originally meant to run alongside each other, which is kind of crazy to me considering how many other features Star Resonance has that Blue Protocol, the original, didn't, like having a guild hall
and a player shop and just all these features that you would expect from an MMO. But apparently those were supposed to come to Blue Protocol sooner or later. Maybe the game would have survived longer if it had that at the start, but you know, that's just my thoughts. Yeah, overall, I'd say the story was okay. Not anything to write home about. Didn't seem to take itself too seriously. After all, this game literally starts with this girl dragging us into her debt problems just because she saved us. Which I didn't even mention before. That whole debt plot gets resolved pretty quickly, actually. I think it's at like the end of chapter 2 or 3. We wind up having our debt forgiven, and Irona gets like a whole lifetime supply of hair care products, and our character gets to use the Asterly Tavern room for as long as we want. And then, you know, there's like the cruise ship getting blown up by a cake. There's a character named Undead fucking Ted. Tina running around in a snowman suit when you first meet her. Like, yeah, this game's plot is definitely a little tongue-in-cheek, a little on the wacky side. You know what? I'm down with that. Okay, enough yapping about the story. Time to talk about the actual video game part of the video game that I'm talking about. So the combat in this game is pretty much the standard anime action RPG combat that I've seen in a lot of other games. You have your normal attacks where you just swing your weapon around. You have a bunch of different special attacks that are on cooldowns, including a big anime-style finisher that's super flashy and whatnot. You can also negate damage by perfect dodging. A lot of enemy attacks will have telegraphed cones on the ground that show you when and where the attack is going to land. But yeah, overall, the combat feels pretty good in my opinion. I mainly played the Force Mage class, which has a nice balance of single target and AoE moves, and a little bit of Stormblade, which I thought was a really cool class since its main weapon reminded me a lot of the trick weapons in Bloodborne. It's this katana that switches into a scythe for certain moves that you use. I still gotta try out other classes though. I didn't get a chance to really play any tanks or healers. There's also apparently an auto attack option, which I didn't really use, but I mean, hey, if you have like some sort of like hand disability and it's hard for you to play video games, I guess that could make it more accessible for you. Or, you know, if you're just fucking lazy and want to put the game on autopilot, you can do that. Now, what I will say is I definitely think the original Blue Protocol had better combat, at least from what I remember. And I only played JP Blue Protocol for about a week before it shut down. However, what I did play of it, I definitely got the impression that each class felt very different from each other. Like, from what I remember, the Aegis Fighter, which was the Sword and Shield class, had this whole fighting game-esque turtling mechanic where if you used your shield too often, it would just get knocked away, and you'd have to just survive without your guard button for a few seconds while the shield regenerates. The Twin Axe class was all about closing the gap between you and your enemy and was like super aggressive. And then the Mage class had like a variety of different elemental spells and, at least from what I remember, was pretty vulnerable and almost made the game feel like a 3D bullet hell compared to Star Residence, where, again, I only played Frost Mage and Stormblade. However, they did seem pretty similar in the fact that it's pretty much all about dodging the enemy's telegraphed attacks and then unloading whatever your optimal DPS rotation is on them. Now, outside of combat, the game has a pretty good movement system in my opinion. I initially, in pre-release footage, wrote it off as being another game in the pile of Breath of the Wild clones, which, I mean, I guess it kinda is, but it still feels different. It's not like Breath of the Wild where you just sort of Spider-Man to the side of a wall and your stamina drains as you move around. Now, what's different in this game that I haven't seen in at least any other game I've played is how the jumping is momentum based. You basically have this like super skip where if you hit the jump button again right when you land, you get a longer and higher jump, and you can chain those jumps together to cover a lot of ground very quickly on foot. And yes, there are mounts, so you could just ride around like that. However, I found the momentum-based super skipping to be a lot more fun. You can also cling to walls and jump outwards from them. You've also got a double, triple, quadruple, and quintuple jump in this game. And being able to utilize the movement mechanics to get on like the rooftops of Astraleeds is pretty fun overall. I just like the amount of freedom we have with exploring in both the game world and the hub areas. Makes me wonder if people are going to go out of their way to try and find cool little obscure spots around Astraleeds or Asteria Plains to just sort of chill out in. One of my favorite cozy spots that I found in this game was a neat little beach out in Asteria Plains where I took a break from questing to just do some fishing. And although I didn't unlock it, there's a thing called Terra Resonance, which basically lets you fly once you find these whirlwinds that are scattered around the game world. There's a few parts in the story where you get to use a whirlwind to fly around, but those are like on rails. I've seen in other people's gameplay that you can actually like legitimately fly and like dive bomb and stuff, which looks really fun. Can't wait to experiment with that in the main game once it's out. Something I do want to point out about the movement in this game though is because you're so much more mobile in this game, I feel like it might trivialize some of the exploration since a lot of these maps are reused from the original Blue Protocol JP. What I mean by that is if you look at the footage I'm showing on the screen now, that big like stone pillar was somewhere I got up to when I was playing the original Blue Protocol, and in that game you just have one jump. You can't jump like 5 times consecutively like in Star Resonance, so getting up there, like, it wasn't a challenge, but it felt, I guess, a little more exciting because I had to like do a run and jump off the ledge, and I only just barely made it. And while I was up there, I actually encountered another player who was just chilling out. I wound up doing some emotes at them. I didn't want to chat because I was afraid I might, get banned since I was playing on the JP server via a VPN. It was still a really cool experience though, just going to this semi out of the way place and getting to share a little moment with this other player, even though we didn't say a single word to each other. Also, the view of Astraleeds was pretty nice from up there as well, and it's still nice from the same spot in Star Resonance. If I were ever to make a list ranking the top aura farming locations in Blue Protocol Star Resonance, this rock pillar would definitely be on it. But I digress. I think that the new movement system is going to trivialize a lot of areas like that from the original game. The trade-off though, aside from the fact that we can literally fly now, is that there's going to be a lot of new areas to find with the new movement system, including Sky Islands above Asteria Plains. Another little interesting point about the game world is how certain areas from the original game have been repurposed. Like this ruins area that I'm showing right now was actually originally an instant dungeon in JP Blue Protocol. So seeing it as like an actual freely explorable part of the overworld is pretty interesting in my opinion. Still looks really cool too. And that's another thing, I do think the game world in both the original and Star Resonance is really good looking. There's a lot of environmental storytelling, and I'm also really curious as to what the big blue thing in the distance that you can see from a lot of areas of the game is going to be. But yeah, overall, I really like the way this game world looks. As far as I'm aware, they're reusing at least Asteria Plains and the desert area from the original game. If you look on the map, you can sort of see in the corner what looks like an Arctic region that did not exist in Blue Protocol JP. And I would imagine we're going to get more original areas as the game goes on. I do kind of want them to bring back the other regions from JP Blue Protocol though, because I felt like they
did a decent job of going outside the usual, grass world, desert world, ice world, lava world set of levels and biomes that we're used to seeing in these games. Yeah, the original Blue Protocol had the outskirts of this dark city that was pretty cool, a tropical island, and a forest that had all these weird portals around it and was also the final area of the game. Definitely want to see those repurposed for Star Resonance at some point. As for the music, I would say I liked the original Blue Protocol music more than Star Resonance. Like, it's not that it's bad, it's just all the new songs in Star Resonance are kind of, well, to be honest, bland. And so far, the music that sticks out the most to me are songs that are reused from the Japanese Blue Protocol, such as the Asteria Plains theme, which gives me this really, ominous, right before a big storm is about to hit feeling to it. The battle theme, I think, is very catchy. And I also love that one folky song that plays when you go to a certain tavern in Astraleeds. In fact, the main theme of Astraleeds is pretty good too. It definitely does a good job of giving off the feel of a bustling fishing city. All of the music I just mentioned is from the original Blue Protocol. As far as Star Resonance's original score, aside from the title screen melody, I can't really remember any of it offhand. I've also got to wonder about how the update schedule is going to play out. Now, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a roadmap released for this game yet, at least not in English. So I'm just curious, how frequently are we going to see new regions, dungeons, and classes added to this game? Is it going to be an every 6 months sort of thing? Personally, I wouldn't mind that. I don't know how frequently the original Blue Protocol got updates like that. I'm sure we won't have to wait too much longer to find out, maybe a month after the game launches. Another thing is that the game's story progression is time-gated. So if you're playing this game day one, you're not going to be able to just plow through all the available content right away. You will only be able to get up to level, I think, 20-something, and maybe only play the first chapter or two of the story. And I could definitely see why this would bug some people, because you could just say it's a trick from the developers to make the game seem longer than it actually is. I don't think it'll be that big of an issue, as long as there's at least decent side content to do while you're waiting. Also, I'm pretty sure that this time gating is based on the server and not when you start playing the game. So if you were to say start playing Blue Protocol in December or January next year, all of those time gates are going to be gone for you, and you'll be able to just plow through the story at whatever pace is comfortable for you. I thought it was kind of weird how sometimes during cutscenes the screen will just turn black and we'll get text explaining what's happening, but it goes by so quick that you barely have the time to read it. I also noticed a lot of spelling errors and typos in the subtitles. That was a little obnoxious, not gonna lie, since this is supposed to be a professional game release. And I also found the menus in general to be a little convoluted. Now this I sort of get because Star Resonance was made to also be played on mobile, so they have the menus set up to be touchscreen friendly. That doesn't work as well with a mouse and keyboard though, so I hope in a future update they add maybe a PC layout for the menu that you can toggle in the options somewhere. That it would just be nice. I've also heard a lot of people say that controller support for this game is absolute ass. I mean, I mainly play these sort of games with a mouse and keyboard, so it's not really an issue for me. Still though, it's nice to have different accessibility options for people who just want to play with a controller and get a more console-like experience. So aside from those gripes, the only real major issue is I think the combat feels a lot more standard than the original game, which is a direct downgrade if you ask me. On the bright side though, Star Resonance has a guild system which was completely absent from Blue Protocol JP, and there are dogs you can find in the game world that you can actually pet. I repeat, you can pet the doggos. And I think that alone makes Blue Protocol Star Resonance one of the best games that has ever graced humanity. Period. I'm really excited for the launch of Blue Protocol Star Resonance, and I'm planning on playing the ever-living shit out of it over the next few months, and I'm definitely going to be making some more YouTube videos covering the game, so if you want to make sure to catch those as soon as they're out, be sure to like and subscribe. Do it now. Hey, so if you made it this far, I'm super grateful for you watching this video. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.